I've been doing some research for uni, and what I did was I came across a whole bunch of interesting insights, and as part of those insights, what I've done is come up with a design project, which is about how we could reconfigure our deliverables to support communication across a project.
Nice.
The problem that we found was, well, it's not really a problem, it's sort of an interesting idea, is that customer research is comprised of customers' original needs, right? And so designers abstract that a little bit, but they try to make it concrete, so they try to take the needs and turn it into a product. Whereas people in the marketing area tend to take that information and try to internalize it, so they can think like the customer and be the voice of the customer, which is how they like to talk about what they do with customer research. And then business people tend to take bits of that information and then sort of reconfigure it in their own heads or on paper with other stats and other information to come up with more ideas around how we can actually drive a good business outcome from that sort of research. But as we move further away from the original intent or the original customer needs, it sort of gets more abstracted. And then what happens is the information sort of comes back through a feedback loop around as constraints. So, marketing people will have an opinion on whether the design meets their internal state of what they think the customer voice is, and then business people will be, well, it doesn't really meet those business objectives, etc.
So having a pyramid this way, you're saying that each layer is adding to it?
I'd say each layer makes it more abstract, and so the distance between what's real and what's...
So it's less of what the customer actually said, but more of what they're inserting, because the base is getting broader. Yeah, pretty much. So I guess it's a sense of dilution is what that's supposed to represent. So rather than having 4 different views of the same customer information, why don't we have a singular view of the same customer information? That's what this project is about. I've identified that there are tons and tons of different artifacts that we have, and all of them are important. Like, no one said get rid of any of them. So what I thought we might need is actually this wrapper document, which sits over the top of everything. Happens in 3 places where there tends to be the most tension around a project. One is post-research, so what does the research mean, and how is that interpreted by different stakeholders within the business? Then after the first design concepts are produced, how they're reacting to those, what's missing, etc., and then post implementation, basically. So what's the view post implementation? How can we improve it, etc., etc., and that basically it ends up being a case study for the whole project, which is useful. And we've already started doing this in sales pathway, interesting, because I did a interview with Marita, and she goes, oh, that's a really good idea. And so I think that's where that started. So how do you, as a business person, or how do you, as a marketing person, interpret what you've seen? Okay. And
making that explicit.
So it's not intended to cover what questions or what do we go and find out, and
the assumption is that we've already done something.
Okay. And it's more how do we then get the best use of that and apply it and have a common understanding.
Yeah, and so what does it mean to everyone in the project, and how is that going to play out? Because what we don't want to do is get to design and then have everyone go, well, that's not what I was thinking, right?
I like it.
So what, do you think it would bring any value to the business?
Yeah, I think so.
And what value do you think it would bring?
Well, I think with that intent of having shared understanding, then it's a big step forward. And if you get these parties together, especially in a physical sense, and have some conversation, and then use the document to capture that and formalise some of it, that's a big step in trying to get that cross-functional team happening. And the earlier in the process you can get that and get the gotchas out early and align the agendas, or at least know where, make the agendas transparent, you can deal and respond to that early, rather than it being a gotcha when you're halfway down the delivery cycle or at the end.
Yes, I think by getting each group to respond separately, Yeah, I think you're forcing them to play their role and to stay in their role and not try and do somebody else's job, which is probably quite useful.
Yeah.
But because it's then all contained together, you still get to play as a team. So in a sense, I mean, this is exactly the conversation you'd want to be having anyway, but where by putting it into a formal document, you go through the process as you might have before, but you've been more formal in documenting it.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And it sort of follows on from the previous document as well. So you have that previous document is the background and history.
Yeah.
And then this document's about how you respond to the design, and then the last one's how do you respond to the actually implemented
What
thing.
you end up getting.
Yeah.
Cool. That's very cool. I like that the same process and the same sort of structure goes through the program. That makes sense. And I think actually the other thing that would be useful is that because it's you're describing it as the wrapper document or it's the kind of like the summary milestone piece, it could give you some really nice clear distinctions between different phases of a project or something. So it would be a really neat milestone marker before you transition into the next phase. And I think lots of projects, activities all merge together, and that's by nature how it will happen. But I think sometimes both because it makes you feel like you're making progress, but also because it makes people a bit more accountable. Nice to have a particular line in the sand that says, okay, that's where we've gotten to. And because this would be, it's a combined deliverable rather than all the other artefacts that sort of belong to particular individuals. To have those milestones that are joint activities would be cool.
I think the idea behind it, the theory sound. How we use it, get value out of it is the next part.
Right.
But I do think, and I also think that it's definitely something that, I mean, certainly in my experience, these bigger pieces of work, where you've got lots and lots of people involved and they're changing all the time, you definitely need something like that to maintain some kind of continuity.
True.
Because it isn't always all in a person's head either. That, I think that's a bit of a myth, you know what I mean? So that one person who might have worked all the way through it is in their head. I don't believe that at all. I think it's actually about 6 different people's vastly different perceptions of the same thing. And unless you have some way of getting all of those different perspectives and maybe even working styles around some kind of framework, you haven't got hope of pushing it on something as big as this one. Getting your head around all the content is just impossible, and nobody seems to have a uniform way of telling you what's been going on and what needs to be decided, and it's just a nightmare.
So do you think this would be able to
Yeah, I definitely think it would.
What's the difference between this design wrapper and a normal document that gets passed around where people from the business or build requirements and business objectives?
Yeah, it's pretty much the same, but it's basically co-created. So you get everyone in the room, and then they make things explicit. Right. So they make their perceptions explicit. And I think one of the issues that we've had, which has sort of come out through the course, is this idea of internal and external thoughts. And so what's their internal perception? Or their internal perceptions will actually modify how they react to a deliverable. But because that's not explicit, what we find is there's a lot of tension around when that stuff comes out, and it usually comes out around when something's sort of physical or something. So if we can make it explicit before we get to that point, then we can sort of cater for those issues before they come up, if that makes sense.
Which is the common thread to misunderstandings and misconceptions is people have got a different background or a filter system. So this is a mechanism to bring this together, so that everyone's using the same filter mechanism, I guess. Well, I think so. I'm interested to see this play out with the group of people come together.
Yeah.
But I think one of the observations so far is it's been happening over time, and so it's really hard to coalesce that back to a point.
Yeah.
And and this framework seems to have brought that back to a common view that it's really a physical place to aggregate thoughts around, which I really like. I think it's when I saw it when originally presented, I thought it was a really good idea to do exactly that, because I could see it was happening in a time sequence.
Yeah.
But then when I saw it play out on Friday
On the wall.
yeah, I was quite excited by that. I think that's going to be exactly what's required, because we keep resetting and going back to, you might have a conversation or a meeting, but other people forget what's been discussed or didn't quite get it, or other things have influenced them in the past. So it becomes a common gravitational point for people to come back to and build the story. It doesn't have to be, here's the document, now go read it. It builds over time. I really like the way that you can have the slices. And I think the mixture of the text and the pictures, so it gives people, that different perspective and a different way of absorbing information and relating to it as well. So I think that's probably quite a powerful part of it.
So that makes sense. Cool.
Great.
Like it. It's nice.
This is awesome. You should read this. This is genius.
Am I just responding to what you've just described
Yeah.
to me? That's great. I like it. I think it's going to be successful.
Excellent.
Just realised something.
Mm-hmm.
I woke up too late this morning and I haven't had breakfast yet.